Democrats keep demanding justice for what happened on January 6th at the Capitol. They call it an insurrection, and they immediately called it an insurrection. It was a riot. It was kind of bad in some places, but they're acting like it was literally an insurrection. But where are the advocates for the people whose lives have been destroyed, whose businesses and dreams have been completely destroyed by the other insurrection? I'm talking about the ongoing riots and looting that are still affecting the entirety of this country. Now, of course, the riots were substantially worse a year ago. They're not nearly as bad now when they do pop up. It's more like it used to be ongoing antifa violence. We still see protests. We still see chaos in the streets. But last year was pretty bad. We saw bodegas, little corner stores, mom and pop shops completely destroyed in cities across the country. And since then, we have seen progressive district attorneys keep cutting loose the criminals who committed these crimes. Where are the advocates on the right? Oh, I know. They're commentators. They're people who are challenging the Democrats on YouTube and Twitter. Where are the Republicans? Why don't the Republicans come out and say insurrection, insurrection, insurrection? They don't. They're not fighting. They're sitting on their hands for the most part. Meanwhile, the people in these big cities suffer, and these big cities keep, making it worse for themselves. They keep voting in progressive district attorneys who then cut loose violent criminals who destroy property, creating a never-ending cycle of violence, crime, and poverty. The problem for the rest of us? Well, by all means, go and vote for whatever you want in your own city. The problem arises then when people start fleeing these cities because they've become unsalvageable, coming into suburbs and red states, and then thinking they're being reasonable by voting for the exact same things that led to these problems. Although New York is now well aware of how much damage was caused by their riots, they started cutting loose the rioters and looters, saying either they don't have enough evidence, or unfortunately, they're just completely overwhelmed. But think about what that means. If New York can't prosecute those who are destroying businesses because they're overwhelmed, the system has collapsed. And like San Francisco, it's only a matter of time before people realize I can do whatever I want. Cops can't stop me. DAs can't stop me. The system is broken. And that's bad news for the regular working class people who don't want to be victimized. The problem for the people in these cities, they're going to vote for more Democrats. That's right. Even though crime has now become the number one issue in New York, it is still projected that a Democrat will win the mayoral race. Bravo. It's you keep putting your hand in the fire and thinking eventually it's not going to burn you, but it is. Now we're seeing this exodus from New York and many other big cities. People are coming to red states, bringing these policies with them. Now, to be fair, they're not coming in and saying, I want more crime. They're coming in and saying, I'm going to vote Democrat because the Democrats here are more moderate. But that's just opening the door to bring about the exact same problems we saw in those cities. The cities are becoming bad. And I gotta say, it's just objectively a problem of Democrat policies. Because when you look at the top crime rates per capita, Republican cities ain't there. I'm talking about per capita. Take a look at what's happening across the country under Biden economics and Biden inflation. Mass shortages of labor, shortages of supplies, shortages of food, and it's only getting worse. Now we got a story out of Colorado. Gas stations are running dry. Why? Because people keep voting for the same thing. When someone comes up to you and says, we're going to help you and do all this great stuff, and then they loot your city, and you go, I'll try voting for a different Democrat next time. Eventually you need to realize it ain't working. I'm not saying you should go and vote Republican. They're not doing anything either. They sit back and watch with their feet up while Democrats destroy everything else. So I'm sorry, man. Look, maybe the reality is there's just no real solution to this and the problems will just persist because it's not an aspect of politics necessarily, but of culture, which is why maybe we need to start talking about what we're going to do instead of what we oppose. But for the time being, this channel, of course, is your news, commentary, and criticism channel. So let's see what's going on in New York and why they're cutting loose all of these rioters and looters and what that means for the rest of us. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to get access to exclusive members-only segments from the Timcast IRL podcast. But we have also just launched a newsroom with a ton of really amazing articles. We are bringing on a new mysteries and unexplained writer who's going to do long-form pieces. And of course, we have Cassandra Fairbanks leading the charge with our general news vertical. If you want to support this fearless journalism, and even some on-the-ground independent reporting, become a member to support timcast.com. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and if you think the work I do is better than, say, CNN, please share this video right now. Take that URL, paste it on Facebook, Twitter, wherever, and share it with all your friends and say, check out what's happening in these places. Because I'm going to break it down for you. I'm going to show you what's happening in the New York City mayoral race and talk about the mass exodus from these cities to maybe where you live. The New York Post reports charges against hundreds of NYC rioters, looters, have been dropped. They say in the Bronx, which saw fires in the streets and mass looting in June 2020, more than 60% of arrestees have had charges dropped, according to the investigation by NBC New York. 73 of the 118 people arrested in the borough had their cases shelved altogether. Another 19 were convicted on lesser counts like trespassing, which carries no jail time. 18 cases remain open, with NBC not accounting for the other 8 arrests. Quote, those numbers, to be honest with you, is disgusting. Jessica Betancourt, who owns a Bronx eyeglass store that was looted and is vice president of a local merchants association, told NBC, I was in total shock that everything is being brushed off to the side. I'm not, because I've been warning about this for the past 2-3 years. They keep doing it. They keep taking these criminals that are caught in the act and saying, free to go. But by all means, Republicans, keep saying back the blue in places like New York City, where they will gleefully shut down your church, your religious ceremonies, steal taxpayer dollars to paint political slogans in the street, and arrest people who protest it, while allowing looters to destroy the lives of the working class. Thanks, officer. They go on to say, they could do it again because they know they won't get the right punishment, she added, of the rioters who again left the Bronx burning. In Manhattan, where looters ran rampant across Soho and Midtown, 222 of those arrested had their cases completely dropped, while 73 got lesser counts. Of the 485 people busted in the borough, 128 have open criminal court cases, while 40 juvenile defendants had their cases moved to family court. Another 40 cases with juvenile defendants were sent to family court. Sources in the DA's offices insisted that in many of the cases, the evidence was not strong enough to secure a conviction. The offices are also swamped with a backlog of cases created by the court's prolonged closure during the COVID-19 pandemic. Patrice O'Shaughnessy, a spokeswoman for the Bronx DA's office, provided differing information than the NBC report. She said there were 90 total arrests on felony and misdemeanor charges stemming from the riots on June 1st and 2nd last year, and 28 were outright dismissals, accounting for about 31%. 14 cases were resolved with what's known as adjournment in contemplation of dismissal, meaning charges get tossed if the defendant stays out of trouble for 6 months or completes community service. The remainder of the cases were either resolved with a guilty plea or conditional discharged, or are still pending, according to O'Shaughnessy. Quote, we went forward with cases for which we had evidence and a complaining witness. Some cases were dismissed, but we held people accountable because we do not tolerate violence against Bronx business owners. Apparently they do. Apparently they do. Well, I get it. They're overwhelmed. Fine. I get it. Some of these cases, not enough evidence. Okay. They're telling you right now, the system is broken. What you in this city have voted for over the past decade, 2 decades, has completely shattered what's happening in this city. Now, maybe that's a bit too far, though. Maybe the real problem is culture. For too long, people like me, people like maybe you, have talked about what we're against, but not what we're for. And even then, have we done things to inspire certain kind of ideologies or behavior? I think the answer is we haven't. And it's resulted in people mostly saying, just leave me alone and do your thing. Eventually, people say no. Then what happens? Well, the cops say the same thing. Hey, leave me alone and do your thing. Eventually, people are going around smashing up your businesses, causing suffering for small businesses. And the cops are saying, I'm not getting involved. So we have a violent extremist group that's going around providing cover for looters and rioters to harm regular working class people. The media, of course, covers this all up. Not like a conspiracy or anything. They just want to defend their ideology. They want to pretend to be on the right side of history, as they say. So, of course, they can't criticize Black Lives Matter. They'll lose their jobs because it ain't Trump supporters that are showing up and attacking people. It ain't Trump supporters showing up shattering windows. It's not Republicans. It's not conservatives. It's not right-wing populists. It's not libertarians. It is leftists, people who hate the Democratic Party for the most part, but still go and vote for them. And then the useful idiots, the regular people who don't pay attention, who are uninitiated, who don't know anything about Trump, but hate his guts anyway because they watch CNN all day, decide, I'm going to move out of New York and I'm going to move to where you live and vote for these people to come in and smashy. And that's what keeps happening. Who helped these in the Bronx? Small business owners reel from night of looting and vandalism. It's from June of last year. Who helped these people? Who came in? Probably a lot of conservative GoFundMes for sure. Or not GoFundMe, Give, Send, Go, I guess, because GoFundMe bans people. And now what do we get? Well, here it is from Fox 5 New York. Crime is a top issue as early voting in NYC mayoral primaries begins Saturday. So it's happening. Published June 11th. It is absolutely happening. And although crime is the top issue, it's still extremely likely it will be a Democrat that will win. Over the Daily Mail, they say, horrifying moment. A volunteer for NYC mayoral candidate Eric Adams is repeatedly stabbed with an ice pick on the street and left with a punctured lung in South Bronx as city's crime continues to spiral. This is a horrifying story, man. I hope this dude's all right. He's just out here campaigning for this guy, Eric Adams. Eric Adams wants to be president. Wants to be mayor. Sorry, not president. He wants to be mayor. This dude's working with them. Somebody shows up and stabs the dude. They say a 42-year-old volunteer for the Eric Adams campaign was stabbed multiple times in the Bronx on Sunday afternoon. The unnamed victim was canvassing through the neighborhood when two men approached and one of them stabbed the volunteer. Why? A knife and an ice pick were recovered at the scene. Police are unsure of the motive, but note, the attack was caught on video. Adams is the current front runner in the Democrat field ahead of Tuesday's mayoral primary, which is likely to decide the next mayor of New York City. The former cop has vowed to crack down on worsening NYC crime rates, but claims he can do so while reforming the city's police department. Oh, spare me. Just say you're going to stop this. Who are these dudes who just walked up and ice picked a guy, man? Who wants to live in New York City? And then lies the big problem. The problem isn't just that liberals flee these places. It's that moderates do, conservatives do. That's right. I think around 20% of New York is conservative, maybe a little bit more, actually, of the city proper. Well, when crime gets bad, they say, I ain't living here. We can't reform this place. It is overwhelmingly Democrat, so they leave. All that means is that Democrats retain then a stronger majority. So you heard it right here from Daily Mail. Adams is the front runner in the Democrat primary, which means he's likely to be the next mayor. Because they know people in New York don't know, don't care, will just look on the box for the D and say, I vote for that one. We've talked about this on the IRL podcast, maybe removing Democrat and Republican from ballots. So you just see a list of names. I think that would make sense because what's happening now is people are just looking for the D or the R and then voting for it. And I'm like, dude, if you don't know what you're voting for, y'all should not be voting. Can you imagine this? People just walk in and they're like, Democrat, there it is. Seriously? What if the guy turns out to be like a lunatic who just claims to be a Democrat? This happened, I think, in New Hampshire. A trans Satanist anarchist ran as a Republican, actually won the primary because people were just like, I'll vote for that. Do you know anything about this individual's policy positions? Oh, but they got really angry when they found out they voted for this person because they don't agree ideologically. Well, that's your fault. Sorry, you put your name behind them. Stop voting for people based on party and vote for people who will do something about this. But here's the problem. Even this Eric Adams guy is saying he's going to crack down, but try to reform the police department. Okay, for the most part, I can respect that. But just be strong. Just say, no, we will not stand for this. We will not accept this crime. And we will bring about change. Crime could come from anyone. It could be a bad cop. It could be a criminal. But guess what? Almost always going to be the criminal. Now, can we reform things? You bet. We're going to make sure we fix the system and do it right. So I can respect his statement. But just be strong for once. Please. Fortunately, that's not what we get from Democrats because they're scared. If they lose the progressive vote, they lose. Well, in an op-ed for the New York Post, Nicole Galinas says, NYC progressives are going to lose the Democratic primary to soaring crime. A correct assessment, in my opinion, but who knows? We'll see. You see, there's a ranked choice system in New York. So there's concern that people will just say, okay, the progressives will probably lose, but I'll say progressive my number one choice, followed by moderates. And then what happens is if the progressive doesn't get enough votes, it moves to the next candidate. So there's no fear in voting for the progressive from the left. So the progressives very well may win. Now, don't get me wrong, there are Republicans. In this story from Just the News, Guardian Angels founder Sliwa, one of two Republicans in NYC mayor primary with crime as the top issue. Just the News says the top GOP candidate in Tuesday's closely watched New York City mayoral primary is Guardian Angels founder Curtis Sliwa, whose decades-long Get Tough on Crime platform appears to be getting little traction with crime-worried voters in the largely liberal city. Sliwa started what eventually became the Red Beret-wearing Angels Brigade in 1977 in an effort to rid the city's subway system of crime. Now, despite crime being up roughly 22% in New York City compared to this time last year, Sliwa is still far behind in the polls. In a so-called ranked choice election in which the top four candidates, regardless of party, advance, shootings are up 73% over the same period, according to New York Police Department statistics. The 67-year-old Sliwa is running on refunding the police. That includes calling for 5,000 more police officers to protect residents in the city's 5 boroughs, according to the New York Times. Democratic candidates lead the field with former New York City Department Captain Eric Adams in the lead, with former 2020 presidential candidate Andrew Yang and Catherine Garcia running close second. The other GOP candidate is in Tuesday's race is Fernando Mateo, a local restaurateur who is also focused on crime, including overturning bail reform and starting a program, Alpha Tracker, that attempts to keep students out of trouble by giving them jobs. The city's last GOP mayors were Rudy Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg, now a Democrat. So can they win? Yeah, maybe. This is an important race. If the people of New York reject party and say we're going to try the Republicans, it's good news. It means that regular people are willing to say enough of this. Let's try something different. Let's try to actually get tough on crime. Rudy Giuliani and Bloomberg, my understanding, were particularly tough on crime, but it's only eroded since then. And so I can only attribute some of their policies to what we're currently seeing now. But for the most part, it's probably Bill de Blasio. And don't forget the federal level, too. A lot of crime is born of poverty, and we can thank Joe Biden for a lot of that poverty. Now, here's what you have to look forward to. Because I can already hear many people saying, yo, I don't live in New York City. I don't care. Sure. In 2018, The Hill published this op-ed, The Great Exodus Out of America's Blue Cities. Am I the only one in my spinning class at Equinox in Manhattan who's fed up paying $200 every month for a gym with clean showers, $3,000 a month in rent for an apartment without cockroaches, and $8 every morning for coffee? Am I the only one moving through the greater part of New York City boroughs and seeing an inexorable march of urban decay matched with the discomfort of crowding and inexplicable costs? I know I'm not. New York is one of the most expensive is the most expensive city in America. Its lower cost neighborhoods are riddled with crime and homelessness. Its public schools, some of which are among the worst in the nation, look more like prisons than places of learning. With between up to 50% of their paycheck going to a combination of federal, local, and city taxes, not including other consumer taxes baked into every aspect of their consumer practices, residents don't even have the comfort of knowing that their tax expenditures are going to the improvement of their lives in the city. New York infamously misuses the hard-earned tax revenue of its citizens in ways that scarcely benefit them. Eventually, city and state taxes, fees, and regulations become so burdensome that people and corporations jump ship. More people are currently fleeing New York than any other metropolitan area in the nation. More than 1 million people have moved out of New York City's metro since 2010 in search of greener pastures, which amounts to a negative net migration rate of 4.4%. But this, my friends, was in 2018. In 2020, the coming blue city exodus, another op-ed from Hill. The sentiment has been expanding. And I'm showing you this in 2018 and 2020. It just keeps happening. More and more reasons to flee these cities. And you know, they're going to come to where you live. And then one day you're going to be sitting in your PTA meeting and you're going to be talking about what kind of values that should be instilled in your children. When all of a sudden you're going to see someone raise their hand and say, what are you doing to teach your children about systemic racism and about how police are evil white supremacists? And then you're gonna see the panel, the board members go, we are going to be incorporating this. We're absolutely. You may be shocked. It's happening even in West Virginia. And you'll say, whoa, who is this person? They don't represent us. Here's the problem. The looters, the rioters. You see, the right doesn't have many, if any. The left has many, if not all of them, or almost all of them. So these PTA members, these board members, these local city councils, they're scared. How are they going to handle a riot from Antifa or looting from Black Lives Matter? They're not. So they'll just say, fine, we'll give you your anti-racism, which of course just means racial discrimination. And then you'll be wondering where these people came from. Now, these people will come to you and say, we don't like riots. We don't want cities to burn down. We just want people to understand historical racism. No leftist wants a riot. But then they argue about the police. They say we should defund them because they're bigots. Then without a strong police force, the system begins to collapse. This is what happens when people keep voting for Democrats. You look at red areas, they ain't so bad. Now, the Democrats like to push this line about how they're funding the red states. I don't think any conservative really cares. Sure, there are a lot of poor white people in rural areas. They need help for sure. But I think for the most part, people who are in the middle of nowhere and more self-reliant don't care all that much. They would rather just see the blue states stop corrupting everything. But that's what's happening. And as more and more people keep voting for this, we get the obvious outcome. I saw this story. Shocking. Yes, some gas stations are out of gas. No, you don't need to go fill up because of that. Here's why. Okay, wait, what? Why are these gas stations out of gas in Colorado? That's kind of weird, right? Well, under Trump, we were energy independent. And then Biden gets in and shuts down Keystone. Then we get the Colonial Pipeline hack and we start seeing gas shortages. The federal government keeps saying there's no gas shortage. I guess maybe in some technical sense, there's no gas shortage, like we have reserves. But if your local area gas stations are empty, you have a gas shortage. Why is there a new story right now? What is this? This is from yesterday, updated this morning. Why are gas stations out of gas? They're saying it's not a shortage, but it basically goes on to just say, don't go. The cycle repeats itself. People rush in and they all start buying. There's plenty of gas in the system, plenty of fuel. It's just taking a bit longer to get that fuel to stations. If you need gas, you can get it. There's no reason to go out and buy gas if you don't need it. Now, I'll tell you this. Don't be one of these morons who goes with like a 300-gallon plastic drum and fills it up. I saw a video of a guy who lined his pickup truck bed with like a tarp and then filled it with gas. And then he's driving around and the gas just sloshing around. This is insane. Do not do that. You must use an approved canister. I don't think you need to run out full speed to go buy gas, but I'm pointing out things are bad right now. I don't understand what's happening. There's no truck drivers. There's no fuel. What is it? I hear from truckers. There are plenty of truckers. Then what's going on? More and more people fleeing these states. This is just a repeat of the story I already showed you. Labor shortages. Truckers are getting six-figure salaries as food suppliers scramble to find drivers. And it's pushing up the price of fryer oil and chocolate by as much as 50%. Let me loop this together for you to help you explain what's happening. There is a complete collapse of the economy. Maybe I shouldn't say complete, but I'll say this. The economy is collapsing in slow motion. And it's because of people like Joe Biden, and it's because of Democrat policies. So they go to these cities, they vote. Legal system starts to break down. We're overwhelmed. We can't prosecute the looters. In San Francisco, we can't stop all the shoplifters, so the shoplifters know they can just go in and do whatever they want. People then keep voting for Democrats, and at a certain point, you need to just stop. Again, I'm not saying vote for a Republican, but I'm definitely saying don't vote for a Democrat. I'll probably end up voting Libertarian come 2022 or 2024. We'll see. Depends on if the Republicans are actually good, but I don't think they are. They don't really do anything either. So this is the problem we're trapped in. Republicans who sit on their hands, Republicans who in many places can't get elected even if they tried, and Democrats who just keep burning everything down. And if you just watch the mainstream media, what do you get? Insane lies and manipulations. Sure, Eric Adams in New York, he may be the tough on crime guy. No, he's not. Look at this. From the New York Times. Adams baselessly insists his rivals are trying to suppress black people's votes. Yeah, there you go. This guy goes on, I think it was on CNN, right? Did they say you went on CNN? This guy, he goes on CNN's New Day and Fox 5's Good Day New York. He basically said that because Andrew Yang and Catherine Garcia are campaigning together on Juneteenth, it's sending the wrong signal. And that is how many of the African-American Hispanic candidates feel after they saw it. Ah, there it is. Andrew Yang. He's racist. You want to vote for that guy? Man, is that the best we can get? Now that Sliwa guy, he's like, tough on crime, recruit more cops. I'm like, all right. Are people going to vote for him? Probably not. Probably should vote for him, though. I mean, if you live in this place, vote for the guy who's going to be tough on crime, not the guy who's like blaming wokeness for his problems. But I see all of these things tied together. I see crime. I see Democrat policy. I see media. I see culture. And I do think culture is the root of this. Obviously, politics is downstream from culture, something most of you know. And conservatives need to get on that culture train, making fun things and inspiring people and shaping that culture. For too long, they haven't. So what ends up happening is the rioters and looters come out. We've glorified rebellious messages and anti-cop messages. We've made ACAB a cool slogan. I mean, we as in the United States, obviously many of us oppose the idea of ACAB. It's an absolutist and absurd statement. There are a lot of problems with cops, but every single one? Nah, not all of them. Maybe a lot of them. Maybe at this point, most of them. But what do we see now? In New York, many of these looters were juveniles. Many of the rioters, juveniles. Because they're young people absorbing this culture from TV, telling them to smash and destroy it and burn it down. And that's what's going to happen. You take a look at Nickelodeon doing these shows. You take a look at with the red salute, the Marxist fist, the communist fist. You do the same thing with Blue's Clues. You get kids growing up seeing these symbols and being told to destroy and burn it down, and they will. They're not going to inherit the world. They're going to inherit an American pile of ash. China is going to be dancing all the way through. The system across the board seems to be falling apart, if you were to ask me. Now, I know you might not care about a New York mayoral race. I'm not super concerned about that either. What I'm concerned about is in cities like New York, they cut the looters loose for whatever reason. Regular people see their lives destroyed, get their insurance check and say, I ain't going to reopen here, which means crime will get worse in New York City. And it's a cascade effect. You see, if these businesses don't reopen in these neighborhoods, the neighborhoods will become poorer, and there will be less and less money. They won't be able to afford their rent. You will get much more crime and poverty, and then more and more people will leave. Now, it's kind of good in a lot of ways. These big cities are trash, and maybe these people will spread out and get influence from more responsible individuals. Maybe. Or maybe they overwhelm certain areas and turn red areas blue and then destroy those. Like some kind of vampire moving from city to city, extracting all the resources, voting for insane policies, and breaking everything. So what do we do to solve it? I don't know. I honestly don't. But I can tell you a couple things you can do to help at the very least. What I mean to say is I don't know if there's a guaranteed solution. I can't tell you how to make this all stop and go away. I can tell you some things we need to do. Get involved in local politics. We need, if we get a handful more states just to have Republican legislatures, then a convention of states is possible where the states can change the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, make amendments, dramatically change the rule of law in this country in many ways for the better if more people vote Republican at the state level. Now, again, not necessarily a fan of the Republican Party and not convinced they'll actually do anything, but it's better than just letting the Democrats run roughshod over the country, right? The other thing you can do is make culture. Write stories, make YouTube channels, start a vlog, go skateboarding, play music, play card games, make music. Inspire young people. Inspire them to work hard, be cool, and give them a place to hang out. Young people are looking for something to do. They're looking for something that'll make them feel good and accomplished. This is why cults work. Cult ideology brings a person in and then cheers for them and tells them how great they are. And it makes people feel good. They want to be a part of that. We're humans. We're addicted to it. We need it. Well, there needs to be some kind of libertarian, conservative, moderate, individualist culture telling these kids how cool they are and inspiring them to do better. They need to see someone who goes up to this 20-stair handrail and does a kickflip backside tail slide while wearing a shirt with the Gadsden flag on it, or something like that. Or maybe Molon Labe or two-way rights. Instead, they're getting a lot of the opposite. They're seeing ACAB. They're seeing F the police. They're seeing the communist fist. And they want to fit in. So they write those things on their boards. They write those things on their bags, and their ideology spreads. Counter it. Politics is great. It's an important thing to be involved in. But if you're not going to local board meetings, if you're not going to local PTA meetings, if you're not involved in extracurricular activities, I'll tell you who is. The woke and the far left. And they're going to erode that system until the crime erupts. Then they're going to blame you, blame the cops, and destroy the system, because their goal is to destroy, and from the ashes of the old, they will build anew. I've heard them say it. They want the system to break down, and it's working. When the crime becomes untenable, when the cities you can't even live in, people flee, they spread the destruction. Well, there are some things we can do to make a change. But I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.